1. Introduction to Court Presumptions and Assumptions. When engaging in a legal matter, it is crucial to recognize the numerous presumptions and assumptions that courts operate under. These presumptions, whether known or unknown to you, are essential to understand because they can significantly affect the outcome of a case. Courts, especially those governed by Roman law, rely heavily on these presumptions as default truths unless you actively challenge them. Your role in court is not only to present your case but also to challenge these assumptions when necessary to safeguard your rights. The failure to rebut these presumptions often results in them becoming accepted as factual, which can lead to adverse legal outcomes. Footnote: the failure to challenge presumptions in court allows them to become facts, significantly impacting the fairness of the legal process. 2. The presumption of public record. One of the key presumptions in court is that any matter presented in a lower court is presumed to be a public record. This means that, unless explicitly rejected, your case is assumed to be a private matter handled by the private bar guild, not a public record. To prevent this from happening, it is imperative to challenge the presumption by clearly stating that your case must be handled as a public record. This legal distinction is crucial for ensuring that the proceedings are transparent and can be accessed by the public, not kept behind closed doors by the private entities within the court system. Footnote: the presumption of public record assumes all legal matters are private unless actively challenged, which could lead to a lack of transparency in court proceedings. 3. The presumption of public service. In court, members of the private bar guild are presumed to be public servants when they take on roles as judges or public officials. However, this presumption can be misleading as these individuals may also owe a higher allegiance to their private guild. This conflict of interest is a key issue because their highest oath may be to the guild, not to the public office they hold. Unless this presumption is actively rebutted, it stands as truth, and the legitimacy of these individuals acting as public servants is unquestioned. To challenge this, you must reject the presumption that members of the guild are legitimate public servants, and you should do so formally within court proceedings. Footnote: the presumption of public service falsely assumes that lawyers and judges act solely in the public interest, neglecting their private allegiances to the bar guild. 4. The presumption of immunity. Another significant presumption is that members of the private bar guild, acting as judges or public officials, are immune from personal liability for their actions. This immunity is presumed unless actively challenged. However, this presumption does not absolve them from accountability. The immunity they claim is a presumption of law, often unchallenged in the courtroom. To rebut this, you must explicitly question and challenge their presumed immunity, especially if you have been harmed by their actions or decisions. Without challenging this presumption, it stands, granting them immunity from legal recourse. Footnote: the presumption of immunity shields judges and public officials from personal accountability unless actively contested in court. 5. The presumption of summons. A critical presumption is that by merely attending court, you accept the position of defendant or other roles, such as witness or juror. The summons to court is treated as an invitation, and your attendance is presumed to mean acceptance of the court's jurisdiction and the charges against you. To counter this, you must return the summons with a formal rejection of the court's jurisdiction and a declaration that you are attending only as a man or woman, not as a legal fiction or defendant. Rebutting this presumption ensures that you are not unwittingly accepting a position or role that the court assumes for you. Footnote: the presumption of summons assumes you accept a designated role in court, which can lead to unfair legal outcomes if not actively rebutted. 6. The presumption of custody. In legal proceedings, the presumption that you are subject to custody or detention is often made upon the issuance of a summons or arrest warrant. This presumption assumes that you are a thing or property, not a living man or woman, making it easier for authorities to detain you. Challenging this presumption is vital, as custodians may only lawfully hold custody of property, not a human being. By rejecting this assumption, you maintain your status as a living being and not as a piece of property subject to the court's control. Footnote: the presumption of custody incorrectly treats individuals as property, which must be actively rejected to preserve one's personal freedom. 7. The presumption of court guardianship. Courts often operate under the presumption that individuals are residents or wards of a local government jurisdiction, subject to its rules and regulations. This presumption is tied to citizenship or residency statuses, which, if not explicitly challenged, can be used to assert the court's jurisdiction over you. To prevent this, you must challenge the presumption that you are a citizen or resident of the jurisdiction and affirm that you do not accept any title or legal designation that subjects you to their control. Footnote: the presumption of court guardianship assumes jurisdiction over individuals based on their presumed residency or citizenship, which must be rebutted to avoid loss of autonomy. 8. The presumption of court trusteeship. Another important presumption is that the court acts as a public trustee. In this case, the court presumes that it has the authority to manage and oversee legal matters as though it were a trustee managing your affairs. To rebut this, you must explicitly assert that you are only present by invitation and do not accept the court's role as a trustee over your legal matters. Failing to do so can result in the court assuming authority that it does not lawfully have. Footnote: the presumption of court trusteeship assumes the court has the right to manage your affairs, which must be challenged to maintain control over your legal matters. 9. The presumption of government as executive and beneficiary. The presumption that government entities act as both the executive and the beneficiary in legal matters is another assumption courts make. This presumption often goes unchallenged, resulting in government officials holding dual roles that may conflict with their duties. To challenge this, you must assert your position as an executive and question whether the government officials are acting in both roles. By doing so, you maintain your standing in the case and prevent any misapplication of authority. Footnote: the presumption of government as both executive and beneficiary assumes a conflict of interest in court, which must be actively addressed to preserve fairness. 10. The presumption of incompetence. A pervasive presumption in court is that you, as an individual, are incompetent in the eyes of the law. This presumption operates on the assumption that you cannot represent yourself or understand legal matters without the help of an attorney. To rebut this presumption, you must assert your competence and challenge the assumption that you need legal representation. This is an important step in maintaining your autonomy in legal proceedings. Footnote: the presumption of incompetence treats individuals as incapable of managing their own legal matters, requiring active rebuttal to assert personal legal competency. 11. The presumption of guilt. The presumption of guilt is an assumption that the court makes when you are accused of a crime. This presumption exists whether or not you plead guilty. It assumes that, unless you actively challenge it, you are guilty and subject to the court's authority. To fight this, you must prepare an affidavit of truth or a motion to dismiss with extreme prejudice before entering the courtroom, thus ensuring that the presumption of guilt does not stand as the truth. Footnote: the presumption of guilt automatically applies unless actively rebutted by preparing an affidavit or motion to dismiss, ensuring fairness in legal proceedings. 12. The presumption of legal jurisdiction. The final presumption is that the court automatically has jurisdiction over you simply by virtue of your presence. This presumption is a foundational element of court authority, but it can be challenged by asserting that you do not consent to the jurisdiction and questioning the court's legal basis for assuming jurisdiction. Without challenging this presumption, you may unwittingly submit to the court's authority. Footnote: the presumption of legal jurisdiction automatically applies based on your presence, which must be challenged to prevent unlawful submission to the court's authority. Conclusion: rebutting court presumptions. By understanding and actively rebutting these 12 key presumptions, you can protect your rights and maintain control over your legal matters. Remember that courts operate under a set of assumptions that can be contested. Knowledge of these presumptions is essential for navigating the legal system and ensuring that you are not unfairly subjected to its presumptions. Whether through written notices or verbal challenges, ensuring that these presumptions are properly rebutted is key to maintaining your autonomy in legal proceedings. Footnote: Rebutting court presumptions is essential for maintaining control in legal proceedings and ensuring a fair outcome.